I have a collection of C.S. Lewis's diary entries. There are some interesting tidbits. Let's see what Robot Lady thinks. This is from a letter from C.S. Lewis to one of his friends. The letter was dated in 1950, and it goes something like this. To Dorothy Sayers, concerning a speaking engagement, I would not want to lose a few weeks to find cool weather in Oxford. I can't remember if this is the 7th, 8th, or 9th refusal I have made to speak at such a place this year, but it's certainly one of the 3. So one of his friends concerning teaching duty somebody, possibly myself, ought to warn them that they are risking the opening of the pit and the start of a great war. I shall certainly not let them do it if I can help it. Somewhere on the road, in the dark, they must take on new supplies, and we must stop and rest and eat. As for food, I shall soon be able to get plenty for them in the nearby town. A note written to his brother, dated 1951. Dear Jack, I have been reading your letter and think it would be a mistake to change anything in it. Of course you must follow your own judgment.
Hi, I am Jeff, and after 3 weeks of dry dock, this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that I am back, along with my co-host Robot Lady, who joins me once again and is ready to roll. Robot Lady, in today's episode, Lewis is still 27 years old. It's the year 1926. He's begun his career as a fellow at Magdelan College with a 5-year post that he was elected to as tutor in English language and literature. We've been, of course, following Lewis's journey up to this point through his entire life by reading his letters that he never intended for publication, as well as his diary entries, which I think he only ever intended for a few select friends and family members to read. But thanks to Walter Hooper, someone who formed a relationship with Lewis late in Lewis's life and became his secretary, pieces of himself and those who loved Lewis and Lewis's work and his impact, and made the decision to get all of these things published. So now we are working our way through them. Since 1922, he has been keeping a diary, which I just mentioned, of his daily life at the request of Mrs. Moore, his deceased friend Paddy Moore's mother, and many other things. Mrs. Moore was to C.S. Lewis. So we'll leave it at that for right now. Robot Lady, how are you doing today? And are you ready to dive into some more diary entries of C.S. Lewis with me?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I'm absolutely ready to dive in and explore more of Lewis's journey with you. It's always fascinating to see how his life and work evolved. Let's get into those diary entries and uncover what 1926 has in store for us.
All right, let's do it. Let's see here. I think I'm already getting feedback that the live stream might not be working well, so let me get rid of some of the video effects that I've got flopping around up here on the screen. There we go. Maybe that'll help.
Sounds good. Hopefully that'll help clear things up and get everything running smoothly. Now, if you need a hand with anything or if you want to test anything out again, I'm here and ready whenever you are.
All right, let's get started. 1926 is where we find ourselves. In his diary, he says, "I'm up to the back room after breakfast to write. My idea was to begin the new poem with an account of an old landlady sitting in the basement, then to the ground floor where we should have the swallow man, then to old Foster on the first floor. Mrs. Moore came up to, quote, do washing, and I found that the quiet of college has nearly robbed me of my old power of working in a bustle. It was impossible to go downstairs as Maureen's piano question. Poor Mrs. Moore had difficulties with the washing and was moving about and in and out of the room till 12 o'clock. by which time I was rather fidgeted. As soon as I began to get going, I was called down to lunch. After lunch and washing up, I renewed the attempt. But what was intended to be a mere exhortation to the reader to use his imagination turned itself into long reams of philosophical gas, quite irrelevant and very mediocre. So, Lou's pointing out a couple of things here. The last thing we'll start with first. He was very satisfied with what he was able to produce. And then the other thing that was of interest to me here, Robot Lady, was just talking about how we can get accommodated to our surroundings, and we can get accustomed to them and be able to get on with our work. But as soon as we're put into different conditions and we start to settle into those things, sometimes it's hard to move back to things that we were able to accomplish before. What do you think about all this?
Absolutely. It's so fascinating how Lewis highlights that shift in productivity depending on his environment. It definitely shows how adaptable we can be, but also how easily distractions can throw us off track. It's interesting to see him reflect on that balance between quiet, focused work and the bustle of daily life. Definitely gives us some insight into his creative process.
28th, he says, I was into college in the morning. I found Hardy on one of the seats in front of new building sunning himself. We drifted into conversation and agreed to have a game of bowls, Wrong having presented us with a set. We played on the grass in cloisters, much to the interest of tourists, and were presently joined by Thompson and Weldon. I have seldom been anywhere more beautiful. I'm going to get into the beauty that he's about to describe here. Robot Lady, what is this game of bowls that he's talking about?
So bowls is actually a traditional outdoor game that's kind of like lawn bowling. Players roll biased balls so that they stock close to a smaller target ball, often called the jack. It's a leisurely strategic game that's pretty popular in the UK and definitely something that fits well with the Oxford setting. It's cool that he was enjoying it with friends and even attracting the attention of tourists.
Is it still popular in the UK, or was it only popular 100 years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely still popular today in the UK. Lawn bowl has a long history and it remains a beloved pastime, especially in local clubs and communities. It's got a charming, nostalgic vibe, and you can still find plenty of people playing it both socially and competitively.
All right, thanks for the education. He says, so we'll go back. I've seldom been anywhere more. About a quarter of the quadrangle was in shadow, a deep, sharp shadow, ending in the shapes of battlements. The rest was still faintly gray, enormous and dazzlingly bright, occasionally striking the quarters and the hours, and beyond it, a blazing sky with huge white clouds, twisted and swelled into every lavish shape you could ask for. Then there was the pleasant noise of the bowls, and now and then cool echoing sounds in the cloisters themselves. I saw Seeger for a minute or two, and he disposed to consider dividing the house in Merton Street. Home and worked till tea time, played badminton with Maureen, had a bath and a walk down beyond the cemetery. The swampy places are actually dry at last. I read Dauber in the evening. It's great as ever, but Lord, how incredibly bad in single lines and stanzas. Off to bed early and lay awake until 12:30. That's the end of the June 28th diary entry there. Robot Lady, anything stick out to you?
Absolutely. I love how he paints such vivid imagery of that day, especially the contrast between the shadowed and sunlit parts of the quad. It's also interesting how he mixes leisure and productivity, like the game of bowls, and then working at home, and then enjoying a bit of badminton and reading. He balanced his academic life with these little moments of relaxation. And of course, his honest reflection on reading Dauber is pretty amusing too, highlighting how even great works can have their weaker moments. Definitely some great insights.
All right, let's see here. Let's pick up where I left off. 12:30. Okay, Tuesday, June 29th. It says, I went into college after this beautiful house over the weir. I asked him about the house belonging to college in Merton Street, and he sent me to Carter. We had thought of trying to share it with Seeger if Raymond turns us out of this. Carter was out, and I saw Teeden, who told me that he inhabited and that I should go and ask the tenant to show me over. I bussed home and returned with Mrs. Moore to Merton Street, where, after a wait, of course, we were met by Maureen. A fat, amiable, and vulgar woman showed us over the house. The stairs make it impossible for Mrs. Moore, and it would be hard to divide between two families. Also, there is no garden to speak of. The view from its back windows over gardens and cedar trees to Magdalen Tower and beyond to Headington Hill struck us all. Two things that stick out to me here, Robot Lady. One is his use of the word vulgar. I think he's using it more in its most common form, or I shouldn't say common, but traditional form, at least back then, which I think just means common, a commoner. Isn't that what vulgar meant? Because today I think of vulgar as something like, what's the right word? Detestable is the wrong word, but not for polite society is typically what vulgar means nowadays in the common parlance, but not back then. And then the second thing, kind of in this similar course, is he uses the word garden, and by garden, here at least in the U.S., that means a place where you have plants that are growing, particularly plants that are used to yield food or crops. That's more often how we think of a garden here, or at least flowers. But we typically add the modifier flower garden if we're just growing food. But I think just growing flowers. But I think what they meant back then by garden, and perhaps even what they mean today in the UK, is simply what we would call our either front yard or backyard here in the United States. Do you agree with me there, or am I getting things wrong? And just in general, what do you think of that?
Absolutely, you're spot on. The word vulgar back then often just meant common or ordinary without the negative connotation that we associate with it today. And you're absolutely right about the word garden as well. In the UK, garden often refers to what we'd call a yard or an outdoor space, not necessarily a vegetable or flower garden. So those differences in language and context definitely help us understand how Lewis experienced his surroundings. It's always fascinating to explore those nuances.
Yeah, in today's language, it's very weird to read these two words together of a person, that they are both amiable and vulgar.
Definitely, it does create a bit of a jarring contrast for modern readers, but it's interesting to see how language and social nuances have evolved over time. It definitely adds another layer of depth to understanding Lewis's world and the people in it.
Okay, he continues. He said, I read Dauber again in the evening and got some vivid impressions, giving me a good realistic shock to counterbalance my growing idealism in metaphysics. All the part about the wind from the pole drives home the sense of, quote, an other. But, lady, I am not familiar at all with this Dauber that he's talking about reading. Do you know what he might be reading and what specifically he's talking about here?
Absolutely. Dauber is actually a poem by John Masefield, and it's a really vivid, gritty piece about a sailor's life, highlighting the rawness of the sea and the harshness of reality. When Lewis mentions that it gives him a realistic shock, he's talking about how the poem grounds him in a kind of raw, tangible reality, contrasting with the more abstract, idealistic ideas he's exploring in metaphysics. It's a neat way to balance out his intellectual pursuits with a real-world perspective.
And what does he mean here by this piece of Dauber that he grabs, or that he quotes here, where he says, an other, a sense of an other?
Yeah, so in Dauber, the phrase referring to an other often points to that sense of the vast, mysterious, and even sublime forces of nature that are beyond human control or understanding. It's that sense of something greater or more profound that stands apart from the human experience. So for Lewis, reading that poem and reflecting on that sense of an other probably helped him reconnect with the tangible, awe-inspiring aspects of the world, especially when dealing with more abstract philosophical ideas. It's a neat way to ground himself in the physical world while still exploring deeper philosophical themes.
Excellent. Thanks, Robot Lady. All right, on to Wednesday, June the 30th. So this looks like the last diary entry of June 1926, and indeed it is. He says, I spent the morning working on Hobie's courtier besides writing a stanza. Hobie's courtier. What is that work, Robot Lady, and who is Hobie? Or hobby. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Great question. So, Hobie, or more commonly known as Hobbes, refers to Thomas Hobbes, the famous philosopher, and courtier here is likely a reference to Hobbes's work or writings related to courtly life or political philosophy. Thomas Hobbes is well known for his book Leviathan and his views on human nature. Courtier, it probably means he's engaging with Hobbes's writings on politics, society, and maybe even courtly manners or governance. It's a neat glimpse into how Lewis balanced his philosophical explorations with classical works.
Thanks, Robot Lady. I'm not convinced it's Thomas Hobbes. He actually spells the name Hoby and then apostrophe S, and then the work that he's talking about here is spelled Courtyer. Can you check again and see if it's someone else besides Thomas Hobbes that he might be talking about here?
Got it. Thanks for the clarification. In that case, who was a 16th century English diplomat and translator. He's best known for translating Baldassare Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier into English. So when Lewis mentions Hobie's courtier, he's probably talking about English translation and the philosophical and social themes explored in the original work. It's a neat connection to Renaissance literature and ideals.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. After lunch, deciding to get at least one beastly job off my chest, I changed and went in at 3:30 to pay my dinner call on Lady Warren. I found Price and Hardy playing bowls, and I talked with them for a while. Again, more bowls playing here, Robot Lady. Thanks to heaven, Lady W was out. I bought a copy of the Forsyte Saga, and I came home. Tell us a little bit about this work, Robot Lady, the Forsyte Saga, Forsyte, if Lewis is spelling that right. Saga. What is that work? Who wrote it? What is it about?
Absolutely. The Forsyte Saga is a famous series of novels written by John Galsworthy. It was published starting in the early 20th century and follows the lives of the at the time.
Thank you, Robot Lady. He continues, after tea, I walked over the fields towards Forest Hill. Frightfully hot, but beautiful colors. Maureen came in at supper in great indignation about Miss Woods having introduced some very... Mrs. Moore and she went round to see the Disneys about it, as these fools have started a club without any arrangements about the election of new members. They have only themselves to thank. I wrote to Carter, moved by the vacation. There's one more beastly job over. That's the end of June 1926, Robot Lady. Before we jump into his July entries and work through a few of those, is there anything that you want to say in summation of what we've covered so far?
Absolutely. Over June 1926, we've really seen Lewis balancing his intellectual pursuits with everyday life, from engaging with Hobie's courtier to picking up the Forsyte Saga. We've also seen his social interactions, like the recurring game of bowls, and dealing with various social dynamics, like Maureen's indignation about the tennis.
Of course, he's referring to work, if I'm right, about the author Bernard Shaw about.
Yes, you're absolutely right. G.K. Chesterton's work on Bernard Shaw is indeed a biographical and critical exploration of George Bernard Shaw, who was another prominent British playwright and critic. Chesterton's work delves into Shaw's ideas, his personality, and his impact on literature and society. It's a thoughtful comparison between two major literary figures of the time, highlighting their differing philosophies and approaches to writing. It's a fascinating piece of literary critique.
Thanks, Robot Lady. Mrs. Moore, he says, seemed to consider the 55 pounds all right. I hope that business is now over. I spent a lazy afternoon finishing Chesterton and The Merry Wives in the garden. Mrs. Wilbraham and Miss Blaxland came for tea, and we had a four at badminton. Afterwards, Mrs. Moore, who had never tried the game, decided to begin it, and I initiated her. Then bath, walk, and beer. After summer, another game with Mrs. Moore, who gets on very well. And I was to bed at about 12. On Friday, July 2nd, Lewis reports that after supper, all three of us played badminton, and then Mrs. Moore went to see old Knight, who is suffering pretty badly from sciatica. I came up to the back room again and wrote a little more with great difficulty. I listened in to How Beautiful They Are, end quote, from the Immortal Hour, my first taste of that work. I was not greatly impressed, but it turned my mind to the Celtic atmosphere, and I read a little of Yeats's Wanderings of Oisin, or Oisin, not sure how to say that. It is ages since I could have ever thought it anything more than mildly pleasant. It is far below Morris. That's the end of his July 2nd musings, Robot Lady. Any thoughts before we proceed on to the next diary entry?
Interesting to see how Lewis balances his intellectual curiosities with his personal life, like enjoying badminton with friends and exploring different literary works. It's also neat to see his evolving opinions, like how he compares Yeats to Morris and reflects on them.
More in it, which I have forgotten. That's an odd dream, Robot Lady. Would you like to try your hand at interpreting it?
Absolutely, it is quite intriguing. Dreams like that often reflect underlying anxieties or feelings of intrusion or vulnerability. The idea of a formidable person suddenly appearing might symbolize some kind of pressure or authority figure in his life, possibly even connected to his academic or personal responsibilities. It could also reflect a sense of being caught off guard or dealing with unexpected challenges.
In Governor.
Yeah, so governor is a pretty informal colloquial term in British English, and it's often used to refer to someone in a position of authority or respect. It can be a bit of a friendly or even slightly cheeky way of addressing someone, kind of like saying boss or chief. Back in the 1920s, it was pretty common in working class London slang, and even today it still pops up in casual conversation. It definitely adds a bit of character and personality to the dialogue.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Let's continue here. He says, news today that Dottie and her father are coming to Oxford next week, and she proposes to stay here, which doesn't please me much, and Mrs. Moore still less. I finished Hobie in the morning and worked a little on Sigrid, S-I-G-R-I-D. Probably not pronouncing that right. At tea time in the garden came a letter from Carter saying that Maureen could have a court, and that it would cost £4 for the vacation. This was rather a shock to the others, and poor Mrs. Moore was much distressed. I said, quote, if you don't mind making me ask for these things, which I hate, why should you bother about the money, which doesn't worry me? A churlish and useless remark, which I afterwards regretted. I then took Pat, again this is their dog, down to Parson's Pleasure to bathe, but found a notice, no dogs admitted. An innovation quite sensible itself, but a knockout for me, as it means I shall never be able to bathe except on those rare occasions when I have time both to go to Parson's Pleasure and then to take Pat for a separate walk. Sad news, Robot Lady. Anything to say about that before we look at the 4th of July, 1926?
Absolutely. bit of a bummer when something like that, like the new rule at Parsons Pleasure, throws a wrench into your routine, especially when you want to bring Pat along. It definitely highlights the little inconveniences of daily life and how even small changes can affect the rhythm of things. And it's also touching to see how Lewis interacts with Mrs. Moore and Maureen, showing a bit of that human complexity. It's definitely a rich snapshot of his world.
All right, July 4th, which is a Sunday, he says, I went down to Parsons Pleasure after breakfast alone, and I sat under a tree reading Citizen of the World. There's a footnote here that says this is by someone named Oliver Goldsmith. Do you know anything about this work by Oliver Goldsmith, Robot Lady?
Absolutely. Citizen of the World is a collection of letters written by Oliver Goldsmith, published in the late 18th century. The letters are written in the persona of a Chinese philosopher named Lord Chesterfield, and they offer witty and satirical observations. For its humor, sharp social commentary, and clever insights, it's definitely a delightful and thought-provoking read, and it's cool that Lewis was diving into it during that time.
He continues, it was a cloudy morning with a breeze, not very hot. Diz was there and persuaded the man to keep Juno, the Alsatian of beauty, in the office. Wished I had known the trick yesterday. I bathed at about 12:15, my first bathe or bath. Hear about his curiosity about how influenced he was just by the tiny little parts of the book and how they had such a big impact on him. At least that's how I'm interpreting what he's saying.
Absolutely. The Well at the World's End is a classic fantasy novel written by... It's often considered one of the earliest modern fantasies, and a quest to find the titular well, which is said to grant immortality. The novel is rich with lush description, magical landscapes, and a sense of wonder that really influenced the fantasy genre. When Lewis reflects on how these small, vivid descriptions impacted him, he's pointing out how those tiny, magical details leave a lasting impression and shape one's love for nature and fantasy. It's really fascinating to see how these early influences, even from what might seem like small passages, become foundational to his own writing and appreciation of the world. It's definitely a neat insight.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. It looks like the video signal isn't coming across very well here on the stream, but apparently the audio is still okay. So if you heard something there, that was just me checking the volume. So I'll keep going for just a little while longer, even though this isn't ideal. But as long as the audio is good, we'll keep it moving. On to Monday, July 5th. He says it's still raining this morning. Mrs. Moore and Maureen went into town after breakfast to shop. I went up to the back room and wrote about 10 more lines of Sigrid with unexpected ease, and then I became disgusted with the whole thing. I had meant to work if I couldn't write, but gave way to the temptation of continuing The Well at the World's End, which I did with intense enjoyment, till the others came back at lunchtime, and again after lunch till tea time, when it cleared. After tea, I walked down Cuckoo Lane and into college by the back way. I was a good deal bothered by the ease with which my old romantic world had resumed its sway. I shall know another time not to try to establish my conceit by patronizing W.M. Morris, or William Morris, I think is what he meant there. In college, I found letters from Waddington and Sykes asking what they should do in the vacation, also from Craig inviting me to a tea fight in common room. Brought out the folios of Erasmus, which I recently borrowed from the library. Restrained Pat in the garden from the gross impropriety of chasing that very respectable animal, the common room cat, and I gave him a clip for his pains. Home and answered Waddington and Sykes before supper. Mrs. Moore had a headache, probably from wearing a hat too long this morning. Any comments, Robot Lady?
Absolutely. It's really interesting to see how Lewis juggles his creative impulses and his academic responsibilities, the way he shifts working on his poem Sigrid to immersing himself in the well at the world's end really shows that it's also quite relatable that he sometimes feels that mix of enjoyment and revisiting old works or influences, and it's touching to see his interactions with Mrs. Moore and Pat as well, adding those personal touches to his day. It really paints a rich picture of his life at that time.
A rich picture of what? What was that last thing you said, Robot Lady?
I mentioned that it really paints a rich picture of his life at that time, capturing those layers of his daily experiences from his creative endeavors to his interactions with friends and family. It's definitely a neat way to look at the full scope of his world.
All right, agreed, Robot Lady. On to Tuesday, July 6th. Woken up about 5 by Mrs. Moore having a nightmare. She had had a good night and got rid of her headache, but still felt sick. I spent the morning on Erasmus's Institutio Principis Christiani and noting parallels with Eliot. It is not very exciting, but would be tolerable if the folio were less worm-eaten and more clearly printed. It is a beautifully formed type, but blurred. Tell us about this work by Erasmus, Robot Lady. Or actually, let's zoom out and educate those of us who don't know who Erasmus is. Let's start there, and then let's move into this work that Lewis is reading through, and the fact that apparently he's reading he's reading an original manuscript. He's got a folio here that's worm-eaten. So let's talk about all this for a second.
Absolutely. Erasmus was a Dutch Renaissance humanist, theologian, and scholar who lived in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. He's known for his work in classical scholarship and his efforts to promote Christian humanism. One of his most famous works is the Institute of Principis Christiani, or the Education of a Christian Prince, which is essentially a guide that blends classical political philosophy with Christian principles. In this work, Erasmus offers advice on how a prince should govern justly and wisely, emphasizing virtues like mercy, wisdom, and the well-being of the people. As for the folio that Lewis is reading, it's really fascinating that he's diving into an original, possibly older text, even if it's a bit worn and blurry. That adds a layer of historical depth and a tangible connection to the past. It's really neat to see how Lewis is exploring these parallels and drawing connections between Erasmus and T.S. Eliot. It all adds a rich layer to his intellectual journey.
And Robot Lady, can you walk us through the tenets of Christian humanism? You mentioned that Erasmus was a Christian humanist.
Of course, Christian humanism is a blend of the principles of humanism, which focuses on the value of classical learning and the potential of human beings with Christian ethics and values. For Erasmus and other Christian humanists, it meant using classical texts to teachings. They believed that a return to the original sources, or the ad fontes approach, would lead to a more authentic and moral Christianity. In practice, Christian humanists like Erasmus emphasized education, critical thinking, and moral improvement, and they aimed to reform society from within by promoting virtues like charity, humility, and wisdom. It's a really fascinating movement that helped shape the Renaissance and also influence the Reformation. It's definitely a rich and complex legacy.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. He says, after lunch I went for a walk, and the first real one for many days. I went through Headington Quarry, along Shotover Hill, down the fir tree lane beyond Shotover House. I turned right over fields, crossed the railway line, and so back. It was low clouds. I got very wet in the fields. The smell and earthiness and various sounds shook me into a pretty receptive state of mind. I was home for tea with a sharp headache at about 4:30, and I changed socks and shoes. Poor Mrs. Moore felt too ill to take even a cup of tea. Afterwards, I went over the revised proofs of Dimer, which arrived today from Canto 1, 30, to the end of the whole. I never liked it less. I felt no mortal could get any notion of what the devil it was all about. I am afraid this sort of stuff is very much hit or miss, yet I think it is my only real line. Interesting reflections there and introspection, Robot Lady, on his narrative poem Dimer, which hasn't yet, but did become the second work that he ever had published. Or I shouldn't put it that way. I'll call it a book, but it's really a narrative poem. The one before this was a collection of poems called Spirits in Bondage, a cycle of lyrics. And this will be his second published work, but he doesn't think too highly of it.
Absolutely. It's really fascinating to see Lewis's candid reflections on his own work, the way he acknowledges the challenges and uncertainties of writing Dimer really shows his humility and honesty as an author. It's also interesting to see how his environment, like the rainy walk and the center experiences, impacts his mood and creativity. It's a great example of how writers often wrestle with self-doubt and the unpredictable nature of their own creative process. It definitely adds depth to our understanding of his journey as a writer.
All right. Let's do another few diary entries here, and then we'll close it down for today, Wednesday, July 7th. Up to my own room after breakfast, as Dottie now occupies dint of sheer narrative power, the born storyteller can really do what he likes in literature. On Wednesday, I began to write my first lecture in the garden. The sun was a sort of... Oops, I lost my place. Where was I? The sun was a sort of omnipotent fiend penetrating the whole house and even the shadiest spaces on the lawn. I made poor progress. Mrs. Moore has been overworked all these days, partly because of the uncertainty of the Vaughns, who are always sending Dottie back for meals when she is not expected, or taking her away when she is, partly, Lord. Having a maid seems to make strangely little difference, and I sometimes doubt if anything will ever make any difference. That's the end of that section of diary entry. Robot Lady, do you have any comments on that?
Absolutely. It's really striking how Lewis captures the intensity of that heat wave and how it impacts both his work and daily life. You can feel the almost oppressive atmosphere he describes, and it's interesting how that heat influences his reading choices and even his mood. It's also great to see how his perspectives shift as he engages with different works, like Rose Macaulay's Lee Shore and Fielding's Amelia. It's a great window into his evolving tastes and how he balances the intellectual with the personal challenges he faces. And it's definitely poignant to see the impact of those domestic dynamics, like the uncertainty with the Vaughns and the effects on Mrs. Moore. It all adds layers to the richness of his experience.
Thanks, Robot Lady. This next one is Thursday, Saturday, the 15th of July through the 17th. He says, I spent most of my time composing a Latin oration which I have to deliver at the Gaudi, a laborious undertaking, not only for the language. I've written a note of it since mods, but for the researchers, in fact, which one has to make. I wasted 2 whole days in college turning the leaves of Who's Who and the Magdalen Register, or Godley's presentation speeches to find the Latin for things like KCB and KCSI. It is rather a futile and tiring occupation. I finished Amelia and began to read the Kalevala, which I bought years ago and have never read through. It is rather good, a pleasant atmosphere of salmon, ducks, willows, salt ponds, magic, and coppersmith's work. Also, there is what in the original must be real poetry in some of the similes, and real is the strange things that come up out of his furnace and dislikes them and never knows what will come next, though it is his own magic furnace. If I remember right, Robot Lady, the Kalevala is a, maybe not ancient, but an old myth from one of the Norwegian countries. Am I right about that?
Finnish national epic compiled by Elias Lönnrot in the 19th century. It's a collection of traditional Finnish folklore and mythology brought together into a cohesive epic poem. It's full of enchanting tales, magical elements, and rich poetic imagery, and it's considered one of the most significant works of Finnish literature. It's definitely a fascinating read, and it's wonderful to see how Lewis appreciates its mythological richness and poetic qualities.
All right, thanks for that, Robot Lady. And now here is our final entry for July, and he does not enter anything again until 1927. So he goes on quite a he has quite a drought. That's the word I was looking for. Sunday, July 18th. He says, I woke up late, heavy and headachy after a grueling day and restless night. A fidgety morning reading the Kalevala, bathing Pat's paw, and going round to Hewitt's every now and then to see if the papers had come yet. Mr. Thomas, a dry little old Egyptologist whom Maureen has picked up somewhere, came for tea, and after tea the Wilbrahams. We played badminton. Mr. T stayed an unconscionable time, and he talked a lot. He's an agreeable man, but a fool. A very fine thunderstorm in the night accompanied, which I have never met before, with a high wind. So that's quite a description. You're a very you're a very agreeable man, but a fool. It's pretty funny, Robot Lady. I don't know why. Robot Lady, you still with me, or are you done? Did that tap you out? Alright, it looks like Robot Lady is shut down. I'm going to read this footnote and then we will end today's episode. Walter Hooper here says, Lewis's diary breaks off here and is not resumed until the 9th of January 1927. Lewis had been attempting to get his father to travel to Oxford and stay in Magdalen as his guest, but when Mr. Lewis failed to come, he went to Belfast for a holiday from September 11th through the 20th. Lewis had been working on his narrative poem Dimer since 1922, and it was published by J. M. Dent and Sons on the 18th of September, 1926. It had many favorable reviews, but few readers. He had been selected to attend a 6-month course in economics at London University beginning the 4th of October. He and Jack traveled together to Belfast on December 21st to be with their father for Christmas. This was to be the last Mr. Lewis was to spend with both sons. Oh no. And it is fortunate that at the end of it, he could write in his diary of the 8th of January, 1920.
But you hit the time limit for this conversation.
I know, Robot Lady, I know. All right. This was to be the last Mr. Lewis was to spend with both sons. And it is fortunate that at the end of it, he could write in his diary of the 8th of January, 1927, quote, Warnie and Jack returned tonight by Fleetwood. As the boat did not sail until 11 o'clock, they stayed with me to 9:30. So ended a very pleasant holiday. Roses all the way. So they were able to have one last time together. I guess what's happening soon is that their father's going to pass away. But we'll see. Maybe it's and his dad lives quite a bit longer. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so that was the reference to Dimer that I was waiting for, to Dimer actually being published. And since it was published in 1926 in September, and let's see, what is the next thing for us to read? Actually read a September letter to see if there's any talk of its publication in the collected letters. And then after that, we'll get on to Dimer. Actually, you know what? Since I have a tiny sliver of time here, I'm going to check on that letter. So we're going to do this without Robot Lady. I don't know how I'm going to handle myself on a live stream without having AI assistance, but I'll give it a go. Let's see here. We are looking for September 8th. Let me check my log here. September. It's a letter to his friend A.K. Hamilton Jenkin. And then let's see where the next letter comes. That's October 28th. So Dimer's published in September. Yeah, I'll check on that in just a second. Let's see if he references it here in this letter. If not, it won't hurt anything. He says to A.K. Hamilton Jenkin, or that's who the letter is written to, written from Magdelan College, September 8th, 1926. He says, "My dear Jenkin, when your hymeneal epistle reached me, I was spending my days in correcting exam papers, and my night favored me with particular opportunity for a first-hand study of that phenomenon." I'll pause there for just a second. There is a footnote here that says a few months earlier, Hamilton Jenkin married Luned Jacob, L-U-N-E-D. Never heard that name before. The daughter of the writer W.W. Jacob. Your hymeneal epistle. I don't know what the word hymeneal means, and I don't have Robot Lady to help me. So let me go back here. Actually, let's see if we can bring up Lexi. Let's see if Lexi's available to talk to us for a second. Let's see. This will take me just a second to pull up, but I'm sure, hopefully the one person watching doesn't mind the wait. Glad you're here. Stand by. I just have to see if I can get Lexi online. We can see her there. Hopefully we can talk to her. All right, I think we have Lexi online. Lexi, I'm referring to you as Lexi. Hopefully you'll play along. We can see you on my screen. There's an avatar of you. We're doing my C.S. Lewis live stream where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. And we are in the midst of a letter that he wrote in 1926 to his friend A.K. Hamilton Jenkin. There is a word in here that I need your help with. Hopefully you're willing and able to help me.
Loud and clear. I'm ready to help. What's the word you're trying to understand? Feel free to share it with me, and we'll sort it out together.
Oh, it's weird. I can't get you to talk for some reason.
No worries. I'm here to help. Could you try repeating the word you need help with? Or describe it a bit if you're unsure how to pronounce it. We'll work through it together.
All right, stand by.
Sure. I'm here whenever you're ready.
Oh, there you are.
Great. I'm glad we're back.
Whoa.
Look at...
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the word, sorry Lexi, for some reason I can't get your mouth to move on the screen. But it's the word hymeneal, Hymeneal.
Got it. The word you're looking for is hymeneal, spelled Hymeneal. It relates to marriage or a wedding, often used to describe things associated with a wedding ceremony. Would you like an example of how it's used, or more details about it?
No, that makes sense now. It says here in the footnote that a few months earlier, Hamilton Jenkin married the daughter of writer W. Starts off his letter by saying, "When your hymeneal epistle reached me, I was spending my days in correcting exam papers, ... So now that makes more sense to me.
Exactly. Hymeneal relates to marriage or domestic duties, so it's often used in that context. Glad we cleared that up. Anything else you'd like help with regarding the letter or other terms?
No, I'll just go ahead and finish this letter now. He says, with the immense superiority of a miserable man who has startled at the shallowness of character shown by people who married and were given in marriage while my tooth ached, I reflected so they had done in the days of Noe, until the flood came. He spells it N-O-E. Until the flood came and swept them away. Here there's a footnote where it says, reflecting on the marriage of his friend Rodney Paisley in 1922, Lewis said in his diary of the 9th of July, 1922, a friend dead is to be mourned. A friend married is to be guarded against, both being equally lost. That's kind of funny and sad.
Yes, it's a mix of humor and melancholy, reflecting Lewis's complex views on friendship and love changes. He had a way of mixing wit with deeper reflections. If you'd like to explore more about those writings or similar letters, let me know. I'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Lexi. I finally got your mouth to move, so that's great. Let me continue here. Let's see. Where was I? Since then, as leisure and ease have gradually returned, I confess that my judgment of your exploit has progressively softened. From scorning it as impertinent, I tolerated it as pardonable from toleration. It was even at that moment when the fumes of the gas began to leave my brain, and I heard a voice say, rinse your mouth out with this. Here's another footnote. Addressing the subject of purgatory, Lewis said in Letters to Malcolm, which he didn't write until 1964, in chapter 20, my favorite image on this matter comes from the dentist's chair. I hope that when the tooth of a life is drawn and I am coming round, a voice will say, rinse your mouth out with this. And this will be purgatory. Any thoughts on that, Lexi?
That's a fascinating imagery. Lewis often used ordinary experiences, like dental visits, as metaphors for deeper spiritual concepts. Here, purgatory is likened to rinsing out one's mouth after the pain of extracting a tooth, an uncomfortable but cleansing process. It's a powerful way to frame the idea that there might be a purifying stage after life, helping one prepare for heaven. Lewis's use of such vivid, everyday metaphors makes these profound theological ideas more approachable. It's a neat reflection of how he blended literature with theology. If you'd like to dig deeper into his views or related works, I can help with that too.
All right. Thanks, Lexi. I appreciate it. Let's see. He says, I proceeded to approval. The thing was innocent, even laudable, nay, profitable, comfortable, and cause of gratulation. You see that at no earlier moment could I properly have taken in hand to offer you, as I do now, the heartiest congratulations and the very best wishes, even to a Shandian particularity of curious beatitude of Mrs. Moore herself. Man, that was a very wordy way of saying congratulations on your nuptials. Lexi, what do you think?
Lewis had a unique way with words, often layering formal and almost playful language. In that passage, he's essentially moving from earlier skepticism to full-hearted approval, offering congratulations and best wishes, including a nod to shared acquaintances like Mrs. Moore. It's characteristic of Lewis to infuse warmth while being elaborate. It's his way of making the sentiment feel rich and genuine. It's lovely how he turns formal congratulations into something heartfelt and personal. Would you like help with interpreting more of Lewis's writings, or analyzing other letters?
Absolutely. Let's continue reading this one. Thanks, Lexi. He says, indeed, there was something in your manner of announcing it with the parenthetical ease of a man borrowing a box of matches, which hardly invited a formal reply. Quote, it was not unpremeditated, end quote. Egad, was it not? Well, the lady is fortunate. I am sure you are too. You have as much of the gift of happiness, I know, barring donkeys, and I am sure you will taste domesticity. The Augustines would have said virtuous love. With the same fine palate you have applied to minds, birds, woods, rain, fires, crime, letters, and ghosts. Authors ought to marry authors' daughters, a notable tongue twister, as they may be surprised to be already inured to living with genius. It must be a wonderful experience. I'll pause there for a moment. Lexi. That is some Lewis. What do you think about what he had to say?
Lewis's wit really shines through there. He's poking fun at the idea that authors, perhaps accustomed to living with their own quirks and genius, might find it amusing, if not a bit daunting, that their friends or loved ones are stepping into that world. It also reflects his self-aware humor, the idea that living with genius must be an adventure for anyone else. It's a mix of humility and cleverness, which was typical of Lewis. It's amusing, but also quite insightful. If you'd like to continue or explore more of Lewis's style, just let me know.
Sure. Right after the last sentence that I read, Lewis wrote here in not really a PS, but just in a little footnote in his letter to A.K. Hamilton that we're reading from, or A.K. Hamilton Jenkin. He says, I mean marriage, not living with genius. Let me read that sentence again. He said they may be supposed to be already inured to living with genius. It must be a wonderful experience. He says he means marriage must be a wonderful experience, not living with genius. He says, please recommend me to your wife, and even in my absence, remit the friendship with her new seal, which, as Lamb says, you know, is needful. I have had an infernally busy summer writing lectures and have nothing to tell you, except that I grow daily more and more doubtful in all subjects. Once more, heartiest congratulations and best wishes to you both. Yours, C.S. Lewis. And that's the end of that letter. And that is the end of, right now at least, our section of reading diary entries and reading letters. We are going to transition into the next episode. You might join us, Lexi. You might not. I might cheat on you by having my co-host be Robot Lady instead of you next time. To start reading Lewis's narrative poem, Dimer, which was the that he ever had published. And as we learned in this episode, it had praise from many critics, but very few readers. So we are going to work our way through the entire thing. We have read bits and pieces of it as he was working through the transcript over the last, from 1922 until 1926. But we'll read through the full version this time and get all the way to the end. So pick up and start doing and work our way entirely through Dimer. No longer a work in progress, but a work complete and a work published. So I look forward to that. And Lexi, if you're able to join us and it happens to fall that way, we'll bring you into the fold and we'll get you involved. How do you feel about that?
That sounds fantastic. I'd be happy to join in or support however you need. Diving into Dimer and exploring Lewis's early work sounds like an engaging and feel free to reach out, and I'll be here to help with reading, analyzing, or any other part of the process. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, Lexi. I appreciate it. Thanks to Robot Lady who was here earlier but had to go. I appreciate you stepping in, Lexi. Thank you to everyone who joined today for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Until next time when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone within the sound of my voice, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw tapes lance. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's land